Hello. Hello. Thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to be back. Let me just tilt my camera a little bit so that it is a bit more in the line of view for me. So it's good to be back. And as usual, I have selected a topic. Actually, this topic was something that one of you wrote to me about, asking about writing systems and what it's like learning a language when you don't know how to write it, first of all. Of course, many times with a number of languages, we will learn languages that we already know the writing systems for. Very often, that could be the Latin system, which can be modified in different ways. Now, there are a lot of writing systems out there, and there are a number of people who are experts in the field. I myself am not an expert on writing systems, so I just want to preface all of that with, with that statement. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that people can add as well to what I'm going to say, and I would definitely invite anyone with specific expertise to comment and to give more detailed information and to build on anything I say during this session. So please feel free to comment and to also share any resources that you have as well. So in my language learning journey, I think probably is the best place to start what I've done and the kinds of alphabets and writing systems I've learnt. So my home writing systems are with the Latin script, with which I guess all of you are familiar. And then the Cyrillic. And my Cyrillic is a modified Cyrillic for the Macedonian language. I also read the other Cyrillic scripts used in Slavic languages. I have no problem reading them. They are minor modifications. There's the Russian, obviously, which most people are aware of when we talk about sort of Cyrillic. Many people will talk about, oh, the Russian script. Of course, the Russian script is just a type of Cyrillic script as well. There's the Bulgarian script, which is pretty much the same as the Russian script. Macedonian's modified a little bit more. We have some of the letters don't exist that exist in Bulgarian and Russian, and others and in other Slavic scripts. And then there's a Serbian script, which is also quite dominant in the Balkan region. And of course, I can read that too. And that has other modifications that don't exist in Macedonian. Now, there is a book called Script Hacking by my friend Judith Meyer. And I believe there's a diagram. Someone was showing me a diagram from that book. I don't have the book itself because I don't tend to buy books on things that I can already do. So reading the Cyrillic script, I don't have any books on how to learn to read it anymore. In fact, I never had a book like that. I do have for other scripts, but not for that. But I understand that there is a sort of a diagram, you know, those sort of Venn diagrams where you have the letters that appear in the Cyrillic script in all of the languages, then some of the ones here. And if that letter appears, you know that it's this language here. Say, for example, the I, the Latin looking I, you know that that's going to appear in Ukrainian, etc., etc. So you can sort of determine. I think it was yesterday on this Geo game player that's on Twitch, and it was with, now I remember, it's with Benny Lewis. Actually, he showed it on his Twitch stream because yesterday was his birthday. And I decided to join his Twitch stream to say happy birthday to him and to see what he was doing. He was playing this Geo player, and I sort of followed along because I'd heard about it and it looked a lot of fun. And what they do is they go around the world and they look at different signs. So he arrived in Bulgaria and he saw the sign and he got out this sort of diagram to spot whether or not it was really Bulgarian. And of course it was. He asked me if I could read it, and of course I could. So yeah, it was quite a lot of fun. But for some languages like that, there are sort of modifications that happen. You get that kind of thing as well. Even, you know, the Latin script, we know that, you know, certain languages use the Latin script, but they'll have certain accent marks or sort of diacritics that you put over certain letters. So for example, if you go to Czech Republic or something and you know the Czech Republic is this C with a Háček literally means hook, and it's kind of like a a down arrow over the C, and many of you will just know this, but I'm just explaining it in case any of you don't know this or have wondered what it's called or what it's for. And what these do is just change the sound of the letter. So very often this down arrow will make this ch sound instead of having a ch like we have in English, make a ch sound. All of the letter combinations that you see in these alphabets will be quite different from language to language. So when we come to learn a language, even if the alphabet is the same or looks very similar, we do have to spend time getting used to how it's pronounced in that language. And oftentimes that can include languages where you don't see any of these markings over the letters. It can just be that a letter is pronounced differently from one language to another. I'm definitely finding this right now with Haitian Creole, the differences between how it's pronounced compared to French, for example. It's actually quite interesting. So IN in Haitian Creole and French are pronounced differently. So these kinds of things, when you get to looking at writing systems, you need to learn also how they are adapted to the individual language. Now, when it comes to actual different scripts from the Latin script and the Cyrillic scripts, you get onto whether or not the language has syllables represented by a symbol. So typically a language like Korean or Japanese will have elements of their writing systems that basically represent two sounds, but in what would be two letters in other languages. And that's because they work on the syllabary. Oh dear me, try and say that word in the afternoon. This syllable system that you have in these languages. And sorry, and then they so you need to learn. I mean, Japanese is quite involved because you have this syllable combination, these sort of two sort of sound, this one sound combination, these syllables. In Japanese, you have one for the hiragana, which are Japanese words, one for katakana, which are slightly different looking, more pointy, and they would be for foreign words, or they're also used in sort of to make things stand out in marketing in Japanese, or if something's like it, because it's so like sort of pointy in terms of the way they write it, it can stand out quite well in a text. And then you also have in Japanese the kanji, which are the Chinese characters. Now, characters, I'm just going to leave to one side at the moment because, yes, it's a writing system, but characters have a very different history and a very different usage than say the others. To my mind, and I've just seen a comment now, this is what makes Japanese challenging to learn because it's using these three alphabets plus sometimes Romanji, which is the Latin-based system used to write certain words in Japanese too, and also represent Japanese in Latin letters. But it does appear in Japanese authentically as well for some foreign terms and things, trade names, trademarks. Sometimes it will appear for various reasons, but they're the main ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So those four systems in Japanese are used in a text potentially, and it can become quite challenging because the hiragana and the katakana, strangely enough, if you practice and learn them and just diligently study them, and my big suggestion is to use them with sort of words that you may already know, so that the challenge isn't actually the word, it's the pronunciation of the writing system. You can learn those two systems fairly quickly. It's not as scary as it first seems. The scary thing with Japanese is probably the kanji, because some of the kanji, some of the Chinese symbols that you see can be pronounced in, I believe, up to 4 ways sometimes. So when I did my Japanese exam at university in Sweden, I did just enough to basically get to the very basic stages of Japanese. And we had to read a text for our exam out loud, and the text contained all of the writing systems together. And I still couldn't really automatically come up with the Japanese word. When I saw a Chinese character, I found it very, very challenging to not say the Chinese word to in the middle of a Japanese sentence. I know that there are many people who get past this very easily and very quickly, but I do think it takes a lot of effort. So that's Japanese to one side for 1 second. A Korean uses the Korean script. However, it did use what they call Hanzi. I'm using the Chinese word. So it used these Hanji, these Chinese characters as well. And one of my good friends, actually on the social media platforms, who is living in Korea, actually suggested that this was commonly ignored to use the Hangul, the just uniquely the Hangul writing system, but people felt for a long time that they would use the Chinese characters, and up to the 90s, he reported to me that actually people were using these or wanting to use them, which surprised me. I'd never heard that before. But also, you see when you learn these languages, whether it's Korean, Japanese, there are elements of the language where you see the pronunciation and the links to the Chinese original character and its pronunciation, and you see where it's come from, these stems. And in fact, there are a number of really good people who talk about these in more detail with a lot more knowledge than I do, in-depth knowledge of these languages and their systems. So I definitely suggest that you check those things out. Someone like Mike Campbell from Glossica, Vladimir Skolteti. You can think of Lindy Bortas would have a fairly good idea of a lot of this kind of stuff as well, of course, as well as Christine Prisme, who is a polyglot based in Korea. And you would also have Sarah Maria. I'm going to stumble on her second name, but Sarah Maria did a presentation as well at the Polyglot Conference, and then we had another presentation on these things as well at the Polyglot Conference. And I'll put the links in the description anyway, so you can see. Okay, a second. Okay. So when I look at these sorts of languages where you get to the sort of the syllables represented by certain characters, it's actually quite sensible and straightforward. Even with Hangul, it's people always say it's very sensible and straightforward how to learn it. There are things involved with combinations of Hangul characters that make Hangul a little bit more challenging than one would first imagine, because there will be elements where you have to change your pronunciation of the next character block. So Hangul they are letters. We're combined with vowels, and then they form blocks in Hangul. And then you read them as these blocks. But sometimes the blocks go over to the next block, and you need to be very sure how the letters combine sometimes to know how that works. And I'm still struggling with that to this day. Chinese in and of itself is neither of these systems. It's not an alphabet, and it's not a syllabary system. It's not these sort of syllable points that we have like Japanese. It's not like that at all. It's some of these pictorial representations of words have different histories. So the very base ones that you often see used to show how easy it is really to understand Chinese are often based off things that you see and you can see represented by the character itself. So the zhen character is often given by somebody walking. So you see this. I'll try and do it the other way around so that you can see what I mean. The zhen. So Zhongguoyan is a Chinese person, and Zhongguo, Zhong, and you see with a line through it, this box with a line through it, and that's Zhong, which means middle, and then Guo is this box with a jade sign in the middle, which is basically the riches of contained within the box. So the country, middle country, and then zhen, which is the word for a person. So the Chinese, basically the middle country person, the Chinese person. So often they'll tell a story, these things. Sometimes though with Chinese characters, characters or elements of characters are taken, what we call radicals, because of the way they sound. So that can be the sort of the start of the letter, the sort of the sound of the beginning of the word that's used, or it could be the tone that's used from that character to combine with other characters or other elements of Chinese writing to create new combinations. So it's not all that straightforward, and there are over 80,000, I believe, Chinese characters in total. Not that everybody in China knows 80,000 of these characters. In fact, it's way lower than that people have to learn, and to learn to read a newspaper. It's way lower than that. I mean, you're talking, low thousands of characters that you need to learn, and a good sort of mark on this would be the HSK materials that you see to see which characters are the most common, and then the combinations of the characters help you to build up sentences, words, patterns. The grammatical patterns, obviously in Chinese, are sort of where we talk about these sort of grammatical structures in other languages, where you learn the verb conjugations, and how you use cases, for example, and things like that. With Chinese, it tends to be more to do with the patterns and the structures. So all of these things fit together to make the sort of system. And again, with Chinese, you learn these. You have to learn these the tonal the tones that go with the words. However, as with Korean, when you get combinations of these things, they change. Then you have just general lots of languages with just simply an alphabet that's equivalent to the Latin or the Cyrillic, like Armenian, like Georgian, Greek. These are languages I've studied, and then you've got the Darvanagari Script, which again is kind of an alphabet. I would say I've not studied the Darvanagari Script in very much detail at all, but so please do correct me if you feel that it shouldn't be categorized as such. And then also you've got languages like Arabic, which is another alphabet, Farsi, which is again very similar in style, and same with Urdu. And you also get these variations, these changes in this sort of the Arabic script, and then Farsi and Urdu, which have additional letters or different letters, sometimes letters that aren't there in the Arabic. So you get these combinations in those languages too. And then you also get, scripts around the world. Some scripts that were created and are being created, for specific languages and language groups. And it's something that I believe is still going on to this day, quite a lot in Northwest Africa. So a lot of alphabets are sort of being created, I believe, in sort of Northwest Africa. That region, sort of, we're talking the region where you've got languages. This sort of the region where sort of you've got Togo and Senegal and Kenya and all that area. I think there are over 24 alphabets that have been created just recently. So there are quite a lot of alphabets that are constantly being developed to represent these languages, because when people came and colonized and started writing down the languages for themselves, it wasn't necessarily a fair representation or a good way to write the language. So people came later and decided that they would actually create symbols that would represent the sounds more authentically. So that's the script generally, and thank you for your thank you for the Darvanagari thing. So it's people saying it's systematic. Thank you, to Alphonse and Interwebukoto. Thank you. So yes, there are all these scripts. Some of them, even Thai, for example, Thai has a script that has markings for the tones, so that And in Vietnamese, they use the Latin script with markings, diacritics to represent the tone sounds. Each language has its difficulties, right? Gamar joba, nossa. So with these languages, how I go about learning them generally is I want to sort of stay at the very beginning. For a script to become very, very sort of an automatic thing for me takes years. And I say it takes years because it takes a lot of looking and seeing a script over and over again, and reading it, being confronted with it over a long period of time for me to get used to it. I'm not one of those people where I find this comes super quick, or I don't find it comes particularly naturally to me to just read a script really fluently. And so I just want to sort of say that, first of all, because I have met people who say that they learn them very quickly, and I'm always astounded and amazed at how they find this an easy element of learning a language. The elements of learning a script sometimes can be easy. There are elements that can be easy. So, for example, some scripts, you say what you see. Georgian, the hardest thing about Georgian is not its script. The Georgian script is actually very simple to learn. The Armenian script is fairly simple to learn. The Greek letters are fairly easy to learn. The Cyrillic script, depending on which Slavic language you're learning, is fairly easy to learn. Some of them represent the spoken language authentically, and you basically say what you see, like Serbian, Macedonian. I'm not going to say Bulgarian, because Bulgarian has quite strange intonation patterns that you can't predict unless you know the word. So Bulgarian possibly not so much, but the Russian definitely not, because again, you need to know where the stress on the word falls so that you can you know how to sound the letter. But some of them are not difficult because of the writing system, is what I want to say. And so if you're learning a language where you find, okay, that's the case, my suggestion is definitely that it's probably a cool idea to learn words that are either the same, borrowings into that language from the language you're coming from, or English if you speak English too. Names of places, for example, you can most of the names of places you can recognize easily, because if it's London, for example, or Manchester, or something like that, where it's going to be the same, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, or names of brands, you can also use those kinds of words to really use the alphabet, use the way it's representing those kinds of things, and it helps you to sort of learn them quickly without having to think, oh, I've got to learn the word, the sounds, and the script. I find those kinds of things quite handy. As I say, my friend Judith Meyer came out with these script hacking guides, and they're available in a number of languages. They're done by Teach Yourself. And so have a look at some of those. I actually went through that for Korean and found it very useful to start learning to read Korean. I did see something here on, so Alphonse, yes, there is an issue sometimes with Armenian, because some languages, some of the letters look similar. That can be a problem too. It can definitely be a help and a hindrance sometimes with languages where you want to learn the script and you start confusing the letters. My friend Stu J. Raj actually has some really good techniques for learning scripts, as well as pronunciations and tones, and I would encourage you to go and check out his work as well. He has this new thing that he's working on, just actually developing skills more generally. And so check out his channel and see whether or not you find some of what he does useful. For Thai, he has this cracking Thai fundamentals thing that he does, and it's on his website. If you just type in Stu J. Raj on YouTube, you should find his YouTube channel and all of his information as well there. interesting to see things about Hindi. I've checked out Hindi a few times. I find there's such a lot of it. I think this is the thing with Hindi that I've tended to find it a little bit intimidating. I do keep meaning to go back to Hindi and properly learn the script so that I can read it. But yeah, it will take time, I think. So when it gets to actually reading the language, what I find is a very useful thing to do. I have a program on YouTube, on my Chrome browser that works on YouTube, and also on it will work on Netflix as well if you have it on your computer. And it's this sort of what's it called? Sort of captions, subtitles for YouTube and Netflix, I believe I typed in to find it. And it will show me dual subtitles. So I can change the language, the second language from whatever. And I have the first language is English, second language is whatever I want, Greek, or if you wanted to have it in another language. You can then click on the individual words, see what the words are, and sort of get practice reading it and hearing alongside. That can be quite a useful thing to do to sort of build up speed and momentum reading it. Often I find that when you read things aloud, that helps. Doing it in groups with other people who are learning the language is also a really useful thing. So one of the things I've been doing with Korean is get together with a group of people on Clubhouse, and we read texts in Korean, and we correct each other, we listen to each other, we correct each other, we help each other. And we'll often have a Korean speaker, maybe even in the Clubhouse room, and they will help as well and give feedback. These are all sort of things you can do. Writing it out, of course, practicing writing the script and reproducing it yourself is also a help, whether that's by hand or also on the computer. You'll find that writing Chinese, for example, is way easier on the computer because all you need to do is write the pinyin being the Latin script that we use for Chinese. So for example, ni hao is written Ni space Hao, and you check for, basically all you need to do is then check which ha it is, whether it's the ha that's represented by a woman and a child character, which represents good, or whether it's the ha that's used to represent a number, for example, in Chinese. These are all things that you just pick out, and then you just type a number and you choose the right character. So in Chinese, actually, typing is not so bad. The issue comes with writing because you need to know the stroke order of each character. Because if you get the stroke order wrong, for many speakers, it's really obvious that you haven't written it in the right way. And that takes practice. There are fortunately sites online where you can look up Chinese character stroke order dictionaries, and you can look up words, and then they will actually show you how the character is written in order. So if you ever get stuck with something like that, you can always do that. And so I would encourage you, if you are wanting to learn more about Chinese, then I would definitely encourage you to do that. There was another presentation actually at the Polyglot Conference in Fukuoka by Emmanuel Ternon, and he's written an entire book on sort of Chinese characters, comparisons with other Southeast Asian languages, and again gives you a nice introduction and background into these types of characters. So there are a number of things around for you to help practice and learn. The key is doing it regularly, because if you just do it once in one day and expect that it will stick, it doesn't stick. For me, it's taken so long to get these things right. Hangul, when it's put together, it's used in a syllabic form. I totally agree that it can be a powerful thing with Hangul, written with syllables. Thank you for the comment. There are a number of really cool videos out there for sort of practicing and learning Hangul as well. So as I mentioned, Judith has this cool book, Script Hacking for Korean, but also you've got Go Billy on Korean, and he has a number of videos introducing the sort of the letters and the letter combinations to make the syllables, so that you can learn it fairly quickly and get some practice. It does take time. I know that there are some people who will learn this more quickly than I will, and hats off to you, because I definitely, it took me a while for it to become totally 100% automatic for pretty much all of the languages I speak with a different script. Some of them are way easier for me. Cyrillic now is not a problem at all because I see it every day. But I will be honest and say that I would say a good 5 or more years maybe until I really felt comfortable, like sort of just reading the subtitles very, very quickly. Sometimes I would still stumble. My brain would go back to something else and confuse a letter or a word. It took a while for it to become automatic. I think partly because I think when you read and when you know the number of words, what you do is you actually visualize the whole word when we read. So when we read our own language, for example, when I read English, I don't sit there and go, I'm just reading the last comment and saying typing. Like, I just see it and go typing, because I recognize the entire word. And it's a similar thing for pretty much most people, I think, on the planet, that you see the combinations together and they form a pattern, and they're basically like a picture anyway. So I would say that it takes time to get to know that many words for it to become automatic and fast. So that's kind of where I am with this. Typing in Japanese is also easy. Problem is that when you don't hear the long vowels, they change the meaning of the word. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you need to listen out for sort of some slight differences in these languages sometimes that are not immediately obvious to you when you're sort of learning them in the beginning. Okay. That's an interesting thing, Flavio. So Flavio says, I recommend everyone to learn Julian with the Taiwanese invented system to read Mandarin. Okay, wow. Oh yeah, that's the other one, right? Not the pinyin, the other one. Is that right, Flavio? I've not learned it myself, but I like that you're giving these suggestions. Yeah, language learning with YouTube and Netflix can be quite handy, especially when you sort of want to just start reading when it's in a different script. The thing I found, there are also weird things that I found as well with languages, and that is sometimes when they write things in block capitals and then when they write in the sort of the lowercase. So Greek, I found that I learned how to read the lowercase much more quickly and fluently. And I'd see something in block capitals and I'd be like, I don't recognize it. And had they written it in just sort of lowercase, I would have got it straight away. It took me a while to be able to read the sort of the uppercase Greek when it was just all in block capitals. It took me a while to get used to that. So sometimes you feel like it throws you, and you get into this stage as well. And if you're anything like me, you almost feel, oh, maybe I just know nothing, and you go back to square one, and in your brain you just think, oh, have I learned nothing about this language? How am I not understanding this? How do I not get it? If you feel that, I feel it too, and I'm guessing it's pretty normal. So I mean, when people say they learn it very, very quickly, I often have to sort of think, okay, maybe you do. I'm also counting on the fact that you are a human being as well, and maybe you have more difficulties than you're telling me. I mean, life can be a bit like that, right? Life can be a bit like the sort of the Facebook updates or the social media updates where everything's wonderful and you're doing everything well, and it's all positive stories and positive comments and look what I've done, look at what I've achieved. But then actually, when you sort of talk to the people and you get them in a room and they start telling you the difficulties that sort of went under, sort of happened as well, you find out that it's a bit more layered than that. And that's definitely how I experience life, is that it's not this sort of plain sailing all the way through the learning pattern. It's just, it doesn't work that way for me. And I definitely stumble and I definitely fall a lot when it comes to scripts and learning them and getting them right. I definitely fall a lot, and I think that if you don't, please do let me know because I think there are some scientists that want to do some experiments on you. But for me, it's definitely that case. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that this sort of was raised as a topic of conversation. This is kind of out of my sphere of if I'm honest, my real sphere of expertise when it comes to languages. I know about scripts, and I know, you know, I'm not a zero in them, but I'm also I recognize there are a lot more people out there that know a lot more than me about them. I hope sharing my experiences has been useful in learning languages with different scripts, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I didn't answer certain elements or things that you're expecting me to talk about. Feel free to ask me. I will do my best to answer more about it. And yeah. You're curious about the SRS system I used to learn kanji or Hansa, or writing systems overall. Douglas, good question. So I actually studied at the University of Dalarna in Sweden, and that's where I did my Chinese studies and my Japanese studies. And I didn't use a particular system. It was we were taught about the history of Chinese characters and how it helped to make them up into sort of modern day characters, and that sort of gave us a bit of context. And then we were kind of left to read and reread and learn and use actively in our assignments and things these characters, and kind of that's how I did it. I didn't use any particular system to learn them. I just got this sort of this background that helped to make sense of them, and then it was practicing laboriously and writing them out. Yeah. Louise, it encourages you to hear that I stumble sometimes. Very humble. It's true. I'm actually not trying to be humble, and it's true. I mean, I make way more mistakes than I would care to make, but it's a human thing, right? I mean, I think probably one of the differences is that I laugh quite a lot at my mistakes, and I actually find it quite funny when I make mistakes. So I'm not scared of them. I embrace them, and I think that probably is one of the things that helps. And the reason I do that is because I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't make mistakes. I mean, I misspeak often as well. Sometimes I will say things that I don't really mean to say. So I think somebody wrote to me and said, you know, I'd mentioned alphabets, I think, even for this I mentioned alphabets in a thing, and I actually meant writing systems or letters. I can't remember what I meant to say, but I will sometimes misspeak and I will get things wrong, and that's normal. I think if anybody thinks that they don't get things wrong, it's a bit weird. Can't imagine it. Also, I can't imagine how boring life would be if you were perfect and got everything right all the time. Okay. Okay. 我看中国吗？说的中国吗？ What's that? Okay. 明天中国吗？ Huh? What do you mean? 明天? 明天, like every day. Okay. Richard-san, 日本語で、日本語で聞きますか? Yeah, I've been. So, are you coming to Japan or are you going to China? So yes, I've been to Japan and China. I like them both. Let me see. I've got a question here on Instagram. What's your advice for someone who wants to learn languages and share tips with people and teach them methods for learning them as a role model? Wow. So teaching languages, I mean, I don't believe you can teach somebody a language necessarily. So sorry. I think you can teach somebody how to learn a language, because the actual learning is the memorization and repetition and recreation of a language in an active form. and that you can't. You can teach people how to. You can enable them and give them tips, tricks, advice, materials to practice with. You can give them all of that stuff, but you can't actually force them to learn the language, if that makes sense. The learning has to be from the individual. So, yeah, I think as somebody who has been through this process and had different teachers who have very different techniques, the teachers who have been most effective have actually enabled me to find out for myself, and they've given me the tools to learn the language more. And they've explained certain things, of course. I mean, there are certain things you can do as a teacher to sort of lighten the load for a learner. Like you can give them the wisdom of your experience and explain in words that maybe not typically typically things that you would see in a book. Okay. Oh yeah, 明白. Okay, 提倡 Chinese. 我明白一点儿. 谢谢. Okay, let me see. Hello. Okay, let me see. There was another question on here as well that I know went past quite quickly. Can you talk about Hebrew? Yeah, it's actually a good question, because there are languages like Hebrew. Hebrew is a very good example, where the typeface of Hebrew is one thing. When you learn to write it by hand, it's like a different alphabet. It's like a completely different alphabet. Also, the Semitic languages, Hebrew, and I'm not sure about Amharic because I've not studied Amharic, Hebrew and Arabic, and even languages that use that type of alphabet, an Arabic type alphabet like Farsi, tend to write without the vowels. That can be very problematic as a learner, because you basically learn these root vowels. I mean, the Semitic languages work on this root vowel system, typically 3 root consonants, and the consonants then have vowels interspersed, and however they're used, they will then change whether it's type of verb or the noun or whatever it is. So, for example, kataba in Arabic is third person singular, wrote. Okay, but then maktab would be, I believe, office. So this ma added to the kataba. The kataba is always this root form, right? So you learn kataba, and you will just see kataba, and then it could be kitab, which is a book, kataba, which is wrote, or you could have maktab, where you have an M at the front, which indicates a place. And you learn certain tricks that will help you to guess in these languages. But then, as a beginner, it's always good to learn with vowels, and then as you get more confidence, to start to look at text as well without. There may be people who differ. I didn't get very far with my studies of either Arabic or Hebrew. I would never say that I ever got to anything near an advanced level to be able to give particularly good advice. But learning Hebrew, my advice is that I find the prologue stuff to be really, really good. So Prologue is a company that produces materials for people who actually live in Israel, and they teach it so that people can communicate within the entire country. And they have some great materials. So they have the Ulpan course, which is the really intensive stuff, and it has the vowels in as well when you start learning it. But they also have other basic materials to start reading and seeing the language too. Okay. Isn't the Michel Thomas method a way that you don't really actively study, but the teacher guides you through learning hand in hand? Yes, that's absolutely true. So the Michel Thomas method is a bit different in that respect. Okay. So I mean, when I say you go off and learn, right, and you can't teach somebody a language, I'm kind of talking in sort of more general terms. The thing is that obviously there are courses where you can get a lot of stuff about the language in your head. Now, when I say that you can't teach somebody the whole language, it would be very difficult to use the Michel-Thomas method to learn everything about the language. Okay, I mean, it's a great method to show you, and this is what it does. It does teach you the language, yes, but, and there's a big but, the Michel-Thomas method bases itself on teaching you things that are similar to what you know and teaching you patterns that you can transform and switch words in and out. And that is teaching you a method. Does that make sense? So yes, it teaches you the language, but it actually does more than that. The Michel-Thomas method teaches you a method to learn the language. And once you've learned the Michel-Thomas method, you can then go out and see other words that you want to use and slot them in and out of the sentences you used using the Michel-Thomas method. So I hope that makes sense. So it's kind of not a contradiction in terms of Michel-Thomas method does teach you a language, but it actually teaches you a method. Because that's what it is. It's a method of learning, and it works very well. And it's in fact something that we do naturally, but it sometimes we need it to be elicited and taught to us so that we get it. Because as adults, we tend to forget how we learned our languages, right? But what we did as children is exactly that. We learned a standard way of doing it, and then we would extrapolate grammatical rules. Sometimes we get them wrong, we'd be corrected, we get them right in the future. And that's kind of how we went forward with our learning, as just the first language or languages that we learned. And all that the Michel-Thomas method does is it really sort of shows you that in a very clear way. And it uses vocabulary that often will be easier for you to learn in the beginning, and it slowly brings in more challenging vocabulary. So so in the food that you're going to order or eat in the Arabic course for Michel-Thomas is pizza, because pizza is instantly recognizable. The word that you'll use in Japanese is aisukrimu. Aisukrimu kudasai. Aisukrimu o kudasai. I would like an ice cream. So you learn this idea of o kudasai is if you want to order something. Hamburger o kudasai. I want a hamburger. And then you'll start adding in other things as you learn the actual Japanese words. So this is what you do with the Michel-Thomas method, and it works pretty well. But yeah, it's basically that. Let me see. What's your opinion on how much someone can learn in a day? I feel like I can only absorb a little amount a day, and study more might be useless unless I can review it every day. Yeah, absolutely, Kira. How long is a piece of string is what we would say where I'm from. So how much and how long you can sort of do it for is definitely an individual thing. So I don't like to prescribe it too much. It depends on what time you've got available to study and to review. And so it really does differ from one person to another. And the one thing I would say is there's no race in this, okay? I mean, some people will learn a language and they've got more time and more capacity to do it, so they will maybe feel like they're learning it very quickly. But they're going to get to a point where basically they can say what they're going to say, and the learning then slows down. For me, for example, in Macedonian, I very rarely learn new words nowadays, or expressions even, because I've been speaking the language as a home language for 17 years. I mean, it's rare that I will hear something or see something that I don't know. It happens, but it happens in English too. So sort of, if somebody wants to learn some Macedonian now, they're gonna get close to my level, relatively speaking, fairly quickly, if you know what I mean, because they may have gone more slowly through the learning process, but I'm slowing down in my learning because I'm no longer learning actively. I'm no longer picking up as many new words because there just aren't as many new words that I'm going to likely use. I mean, I can learn words still. Will I remember them and retain them? Depends on how often I see them. Sometimes I will mix them up and I'll get them wrong again. Same in English. I may mix up the sense or the meaning of a word as well if I hear it as a new word and then no one uses it around me. It's just once I've heard it. So there's no rush for this. At the moment I'm doing Estonian. I've challenged myself to do 40 words a day. It's a lot. it's a lot. 40 words a day is a lot. I wouldn't advise that normally. I'm doing it because I'm doing a very specific intensive 1 month thing for Estonian on Speakly, but I wouldn't normally advise anyone to do that. I think around 10, 15 words a day is probably more than enough. 5 words a day is also absolutely fine. And you will just gradually build up your knowledge. You'll have enough time to review and see. But focusing on much more than that, I think I'll see what happens at the end of my Estonian challenge. Will I retain all of the words I've seen? How will I do it? These are all things I've got to keep in mind, because it's not just learning them for a time, it's retaining them and keeping them right in the long term. There are many factors that come in there as well. So there's no easy answer to that question. It's kind of the short version, but you've got the long version too. Okay, speak Chinese. Okay, speak Chinese, Japanese, French, Korean. Okay, wow, very good. Thanks, Richard, for being such an inspiration. 你明白中文吗？Yeah, 明白。Okay, yeah. 我明白中文。EDR, a little bit. I do understand it a bit still. I don't use it, but I studied it for 3 or 4 semesters at university in Sweden. So I've done some, but yeah, I don't use it. It's not a language that's spoken in the Balkans. Do you practice language stacking? Okay, what's language stacking? Like learning a language using another language that is not your mother tongue. Okay, but you have a high level in. Douglas, yeah, I call that language, I call that laddering, but stacking sounds cool too. And yes, I have done, not necessarily intentionally though. This is kind of where I think I diverge from from many people. I go with the resources that sort of feel better for me. So I studied a number of languages through other languages. I think my Japanese was taught through Swedish. I forget the language that was used after a while, unless it's really, really obvious. Because at the Swedish university, some of the languages I studied were through Swedish and some were through English. And the language I was taught in falls away and the language that I was taught stays, if that makes sense. The first time I studied Greek, it was through Dutch, but actually I didn't want to study Greek for Greek. I wanted to speak to Dutch speakers, and it was a good way of meeting people. I studied, what else have I studied? I studied a couple of languages through Czech. I studied languages through Macedonian. I studied languages obviously through French, Spanish, and German. And that's about it, I think. A little bit Italian as well, because one of my Albanian speaking partner during the pandemic speaks English. Sorry, doesn't speak English, speaks Italian and Albanian. So if I was stuck or I wanted to ask something for clarification, I would actually ask in Italian. But it was very rare that I would speak Italian because my Albanian is a kind of a level where I can pick it up through Albanian usually. But yeah, I have done that. But yeah, not for sort of doing its sake, if that makes sense. It's just because I like the book. So I have a number of books as well in languages that are in Russian or in other languages that I speak, because I just like that I can learn something different from a different place. Okay, how to create a connection with native speakers of your target language. So, I'm going to kind of say that, yeah, I'm going to take out the native of this. So speakers of the target language for me are the important things. Native doesn't always mean very much to me, only because I find that I'll get more fruitful discussion sometimes from people who actually know about the language. So we'll be able to talk about things and they'll see and they'll know which kinds of words will be interesting for me if they are not monoglots, like monolingual speakers of a particular language. If they can, because as a language learner, especially in the beginning stages, often I find that people who have experience having learned other languages will kind of know which words are appropriate and also which words interlink and which ones are interesting. So I find connecting with speakers of other languages through groups. So it's easier and harder depending on the language. Following people on social media is one way. I do that very often. Also for Cornish, for example, where I have conversation groups that I join twice a week, I find that particularly useful. There are other people who are learning or have learned Cornish, and they guide you through. Some people are further on the journey than I am. I've done 1 year of Cornish, so my Cornish is it's okay for a conversation, a basic conversation, but it's not amazing, and I make a lot of mistakes. And I don't have all the words I need for every single situation yet. But I find that quite a useful thing to find people. Maybe Clubhouse, places like that, where you get rooms where people are in and they're learning them. There are an awful lot of things like that going on nowadays. On the Polyglot Conference site as well, I mean, I left it up purposely this year for the whole year so that people could join in. And there are language groups that go on there all the time still, even sort of, after the Polyglot Conference officially ended, they still meet up for like German exchanges and stuff like that. So you can always do things like that to practice. And then I find my Italki lessons quite useful. So I have some Italki lessons for a few languages as well. Through the pandemic, I've done that for Greek, Albanian, and Turkish, because they're community languages that I don't get to practice with, not being able to move as freely as before. But then also, with I've had with Estonian, you have to create an environment, right? So sometimes you have to put it out there, and sometimes you have to even initiate these things yourself. Okay. I love that you're all talking to each other in these chats. It's nice. Okay. Richard, among the most popular languages, English, Spanish, Mandarin, French, German, which language do you think has the least amount of learning materials? No idea. Absolutely no idea. No idea at all. I'm sorry. I have no idea. I think they've all got a lot of materials actually for all of those. So much as well. Yeah, Andres, do join some groups. Which languages are you looking at? I love the Georgian Script North Star. Are you learning Georgian? Do you speak it? I mean, this is so cool. I love the Georgian Script. Is so pretty. Unfortunately, my Georgian, in terms of like my understanding of it, has gone. It's so bad because I studied it years and years and years ago at Malmö University, and it was because of the script. And then I very quickly discovered that the script was the easiest thing to learn. Yeah, so Didi Madlova, I love it. Tip for learning Spanish. Okay, let me see. Zo maken schriften om apart letters, klankers, de Arabische. Oké. Wie er mensen zo alfabet gebruiken. Ja, dat is gewoon, in het begin heb ik ook een beetje over gesproken. Het is wel een beetje moeilijk om te weten. Dan hebben we wel een beetje tijd voor nodig om alle de klankers, middenklankers te leren. Hoe ze eigenlijk anders zijn in verschillende talen met dezelfde alfabet eigenlijk. Dus niet ze gewoon schrijven is één ding, maar als je in een nieuwe taal ziet, dan je denkt dan, oké, dat is dezelfde van de taal die ik al spreek. Maar het is niet allemaal 100% duidelijk in het begin. Dat is, ik heb een probleem tegenwoordig met Creole, met Haitian Creole. En dat voor mij is een beetje moeilijk om te herinneren hoe ik dat eigenlijk moet spreken. En voor de uitspraak eigenlijk. De Arabische taal vind ik eigenlijk persoonlijk makkelijker dan andere talen. Er zijn wel andere talen die moeilijker zijn. Maar ja, daar heeft man ook heel veel tijd voor nodig. Hè? Any tips for Spaniard to work on the Polish sound? Oh my word. Yeah, the je. Yeah, this just takes practice. Unfortunately, Jose, I'd say that recording and listening and playing back and comparing how you pronounce those sounds and getting feedback. If you look at my Estonian Italki thing, even if you don't speak Estonian, what I do is I read things out, and then the speaker, the speaker of Estonian that I'm using on Italki for feedback, she will say things back to me that don't sound quite right. So I just then keep repeating until it sounds at least understandable. And that's kind of how I do it. It's a lot of play. It's a lot of laughing because you get it wrong so often. It gets there in the end and it helps. The repetition is really important. Oktober, Cholula. Nee, eigenlijk ja, Cholula in oktober, dat is wel moeilijk, denk ik. Ja, het zal wel een weer Polyglot Conference Global zijn, denk ik. Maar ja, geeft niet, want we kunnen eigenlijk niks doen. Hè? Maar we gaan dan volgend jaar dan naar Mexico, hoop ik. Ja. Have you ever been to Latin America? Yes, I have. I've been to Latin America. Okay, so in South America, I've been to South Latin America. Can you say that? Latin America, but South America. I've been to Venezuela. I've been to Argentina. I've been to Brazil. And I've been to Uruguay. I think that's it. Those ones. And then in Latin America, North American continent, I've been to Mexico. So, yeah, 5 Spanish-speaking. Well, no, 4 Spanish-speaking and then Portuguese. Lusophones. Yeah. So yeah, 5 Latin America. I guess Latin American countries you can call them all. I would possibly even class parts of the US as Latin American because there are a number of places where you speak Spanish more. Like, for example, Miami. Wow, I mean, I spoke 90% Spanish in Miami when I was there. Even parts of New York, I spoke quite a lot of Spanish. I'd say my times in New York have been like maybe 50-50 Spanish, English, probably. And then every now and again, something else. Oh, you learned it in order to visit Georgia. Fantastic. Also, I love that you did that. Yeah. Funny to hear me speak Dutch as a native Dutch speaker. Well, native Flemish. Yeah, I mean, for me, Dutch is a language I used on a daily basis when I lived in the Netherlands. So for me, it's very natural to speak Dutch. Okay, let me see. And the question here. What's your experience with Icelandic and what do you think of it as a language? I love Icelandic. It's one of my favorite languages. I absolutely adore Icelandic. I studied at the university in Iceland on their intensive summer course and really, really liked it. So yeah, I mean, I really love it. I'm just getting a warning that I don't have much battery on my phone and I am at an hour. So I guess I should really stop soon. Let me see how we get on. I'll just see if I can get through any more of these questions here and then I'll disappear. Okay, yeah, I love Icelandic. Okay, so sorry if you've already been asked this, but do you speak any extinct languages? If so, how many? Oh, extinct. Oh, study maybe or speak is not the best word. Okay, so I've been involved in projects where languages were being revived. The one that I got involved in I'm thinking how many years ago now, number of years ago, was Honduran Lenca. And I got involved in sort of some of the groups, the study groups, to learn Honduran Lenca. My friend Alan King, who sadly passed away a few years ago, reconstructed the language and built a sort of course. And then I was sort of involved with that program to sort of relearn, help with the community to relearn the language. And it was a lot of fun to be involved in it. It was a time where I guess there were a lot of difficult things going on anyway, sort of in the area itself, and it is difficult to sort of bring the language back for a number of reasons. But yeah, I have done that, and I've also, I've been learning Cornish for the last year, which is a language that the last monolingual, or who was a monolingual at some point during their lives, died in 1777. It's not extinct, and it's a living language now, Cornish, but it had a period where it wasn't spoken actively in its full form for a while. So I've been involved in that kind of things. That makes sense, Jody. And then anything to do with like languages that are sort of old languages. I studied Old Icelandic at university, and again, that's not strictly spoken as a common language. But yeah, that's about it really. And yeah, I always love it when people learn these kinds of things. As I say, I've got some people who are very into these kinds of things, and I love watching them learn them. I think it's amazing. Okay, I've got to the end of the questions, and I think I definitely should close off the session now for this week. Thank you so much for coming and for sticking with me, and for all of your questions and for all of your support and your input. Really appreciate it. Any questions, thoughts, or additional details that you want to share, feel free to add them as comments so that we can share more information and learn more about our favorite topic of languages. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week for next week's live. Any ideas for what you want to talk about? Also, drop me a message, let me know. You can drop me a message anywhere, and I'll see if I pick it up anywhere that you put it. And I will do my best to accommodate and to talk in a coherent manner about whatever it is you want me to talk about. Okay, so until then, take care, happy language learning, and see you next week. Bye, everyone.